One of the reasons why I was motivated to compose the words for Waihekeao was a desire to elevate our taha wahine, because Ngāti Whātua has a very paternalistic whakapapa. If you look at our key origin points of whakapapa, he tāne te katoa. You've got tumutumu whenua, you have whakatau pōtiki I rongo mai, you bring it down to the likes of the four great brothers of Manu Manu number 1 and his wife Maiaroa. Well, they're all men. Ngai Ngai number 2, Manu Manu number 2, Pepe Taha, Pepe Roto, he tāne, katoa katoa. So I really wanted to find a way to elevate our wahine, but particularly this woman Waihekeao, who is so key in the whakapapa. She's the connector. She's actually the one with all the mana. Not Haumoi Warangi, but Waihekeao, his wife. And so it was wanting to get an understanding as to how did Haumoi Warangi meet Waihekeao. What were some of the historical accounts? What were some of the kōrero that have been passed down that led this fellow who's got a very, very elevated whakapapa from the Takitimu waka, and also he has a very strong connection back into the Ngāpuhi whakapapa, back to the Mātātua waka, back to Puhi. But it was really trying to understand, but where does our take tupuna come from in terms of us as Ngāti Whātua? And it doesn't come from Haumoi Warangi. It actually comes from Waihekeao. Because when you look at Waihekeao, she is the only tupuna that brings together within that nice, tight Waihekeao Haumoi Warangi partnership that spawned 7 children, which more or less becomes who we are today, Ngāti Whātua. But it's Waihekeao that brings the tumutumu whenua connection and the Māhuhu Kitarangi Hawaiki whakapapa. She's the one who brings it together in a beautiful tight package where we can go there and say, this is our tangata whenua link, he tu nukuroa te Aotearoa, tumutumu whenua. This is our Hawaiian link going back to Wairoti, back to Wairota, back to Hawaii, and it comes all the way down to where? It comes all the way down to one person, Waihekeao. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to elevate this beautiful whaia tupuna of ours and to let everyone know in Ngāti Whātua, hey, you talk a lot about Haumoi Warangi, but what about our tupuna whaia? Ko ia te kaipupuri o te tapu, te mana, te ihi, o Māhuhu Kitarangi, me tumutumu whenua. So that was one of my major motivations, was to get us to try and understand a little bit more the importance of Waihekeao. And what a beautiful name, Waihekeao. The waters that descend from the clouds. And these are references again to her elevated whakapapa, her waters which descend from the clouds, from the rangi, from the heavens. Waihekeao. Ko tēnei tupuna tumutumu whenua, I ahu noa mai I a papatu anuku. Nā tumutumu whenua, ko ngai ngai, ko tarepo, nā tarepo, kāputa ko Maiaroa, waihui kona. Ka hoki a kiau ki Hawaii ki rāno, ki tō tātou tupuna ki a whakatau pōtiki. Nā whakatau pōtiki ko rongo mai, nā rongo mai, ko māwete, nā māwete ko tiki wharawhara. Nā tiki wharawhara ko rerewa, nā rerewa, kāputa ko Manu Manu. Ka moia Manu Manu o Māhuhu Kitarangi kia Maiaroa, tēnei uri o tumutumu whenua. Ka hono, kāputa ko Pepe Taha. Nā Pepe Taha ko rua wheke, nā rua wheke ko kahurau. Nā kahurau kāputa ko Waihekeao. Ka moia Waihekeao ia hau moi wārangi. Tā rāua ko mākawe o te rangi, nā mākawe o te rangi ko pāwhiro nā pāwhiro, ko hukatere nā hukatere, ka puta ko tuperiri. So one of the, I think the stories that we've only just really gotten our heads around is that both Hau Moi Wārangi and Waihekeao had other partners before they met each other. But let's focus on Waihekeao. And so Waihekeao's whakapapa, as I've mentioned, is a lush dress that comes down directly from Tumutumu Whenua and Mahuhu ki Tarangi. And they join at those two tupuna, Manu Manu and Maiarua. And then you get that coming down to her, Ruawheke. Kahurau marries Tūtaki. And Tūtaki and Kahurau, they have Waihekeao. Kahurau has a sister, and ware au ki tana ingoa. But Waihekeao's sister, she has a son, and his name is Mahanga. And so they're first cousins, Waihekeao and Mahanga. And without a doubt, that's an arranged marriage between the two mothers. And, you know, these taumau, they're a done thing, they're a normal thing within our old society, because it's about holding on to bloodlines, holding on to land. And so Mahanga is, he's arranged to marry his first cousin, Waihekeao. However, things don't quite work out, and we find that there's a number of things about Mahanga. He's a warrior, he tino toa. Mahanga is an exceptional toa, and he's actually got a following, quite a large following of men and other people who gather around him, and so he's a real rangatira of that northern Wairua area. And so you've got this story where Tūtaki goes to visit his son-in-law and his daughter, and while he's staying at the pā, Mahanga has got a bit of a parched throat in the middle of the night and says to Tūtaki, "Hey, kei te hia wai ahau, haere ki te tiki wai mōku. I'm feeling a bit thirsty. Go and fetch some water for me." Well, eki. Who would talk to their father-in-law like that? And, you know, Tūtaki was taken aback. And he had his own mana, he had his own authority and whatnot. But he was treated like, you know, really badly. And so Tūtaki says, "Ai, kei te pai, māku te wai e tiki." And he says to his daughter, Waihekeao, ara mai, haere tahi tāua ki te tiki wai. And he grabbed her hand, they walked out of the whare, and they kept walking, and they kept walking, and they kept walking, kāri hoki atu. And so they kept walking, and eventually made their way down toward where Hau Moi Wārangi was living. But I just want to go back to that whole instance around Mahanga and his father-in-law. Yeah, that's referenced in the Waiata. He tau kupu nā Mahanga. That tau kupu, it's like a spear. A tau, spear, kupu, word. And so it was a hurtful word. And it was a word that obviously had huge repercussions, because when those words were given over by Mahanga to his father-in-law, to Tūtaki, ka pā mamaya Tūtaki, he was hurt by it. He was belittled by it. And so that's why we say in the Waiata, he tau kupu nā Mahanga, he manurere I te pō. And so, yeah, they were like birds in the night that flew off. And so that there's that nice little chapter in our history. But you know, we're quite lucky. We're quite lucky that Mahanga did have a moment, and whatever motivated Mahanga to speak badly to his father-in-law, Look at that. She left Mahanga and was seen by some people down on Ripiro, and beautiful woman walking with the father, and word was carried back to Haumoi-Warangi, and he knew, wow, there can only be one woman who fits that description. It's got to be Haumoi-Warangi. It's got to be Waihekeao. And so Haumoi-Warangi was lucky enough to meet Waihekeao. They got together and they had 7 children. And those 7 children, they're mentioned in our waiata. The waiata itself is a waiata of real celebration. It talks about our connections to each other. It talks about our origins. But it's beautiful because within the waiata, you've got a naming of the 7 children. And although some of the children didn't in time become fulsome hapu, you get pretty much most of our hapu are coming out of those 7 children. The only hapu that really has an origin that sits outside of the Haumoi-Warangi and Waihekeao collaboration is Te Tāu. But that's another story. But when you look at the other quite large hapu of Ngāti Whātua, you've got Haki Puta Tōmuri, that's pretty much Te Uri o Hau. You've got Makawe, she connects into Te Tāu, but she's not the origin of Te Tāu. But Makawe pretty much comes down to Ngāoho, who we are here today, in Tāmaki. You've got Ngāti Whātua Tūturu, strongly come out of both Haki Puta Tōmuri and via Pokopoko, and also some of Rango's whakapapa. So we've got a huge binding and collaboration within these 2 people, Haumoi-Warangi and Waihekeao. And so the vibe is unity, it's called tahitanga, it's a celebration, and it's also, knowing that there was a key incident through that tau kupu that led to the coming together. We've got to be thankful that Mahanga was probably being a bit of a dick to his father-in-law, because if he wasn't, well, we might have had a different, a whole new makeup of who we would become, and I think we've got something to be really proud of. There is a lovely story around Tumutumu Whenua, which is captured primarily by Paora Tūhaere. So Paora Tūhaere does give a very brief narrative on Tumutumu Whenua. It's pretty much all we've got. But what it says is that Tumutumu Whenua is a man not of this world who came out of the ground. And that metaphorically, Tumutumu Whenua is that stump. He tumu. He's like a trunk of a tree that comes out of the ground. And what that tells you is that there's a deep connection that Tumutumu Whenua, the man, Tumutumu Whenua, the taniwha, Tumutumu Whenua, the tupua, wasn't of this world. And so the world we're talking about is a world of shape changing, of form shifting, of he atua, he tupua, he tangata. And so there's an element of being able to detach ourselves from what we'd expect our genealogy and whakapapa to represent. There was a time where our world that we know was full of these different tupua, and Tumutumu Whenua is one of them. And so Tumutumu Whenua, e ai ki ngā kōrero, according to Paora Tūhaere, comes out of the ground in the form of this stump. And he has a number of wives, but there are a couple of wives that we kind of lean on, but the main wife is Kui. And so there are a group of people in the north who have their origins in Te Tini o Kui, the multitudes of Kui. And Kui has been recorded in different narratives as being a grass, a type of grass, a type of insect. And so you've got these different types of personifications. And so you've got the personification of tumutumu whenua being a stump or a tree. You've got the personifications of kuwi being this particular type of grass, and also these insects and stuff. Te tini o kuwi. What we don't know is whether they were actually two people. But I think what we do know is that we have a heightened connection through our whakapapa back to tumutumu whenua, which connects us deeply into this whenua, nukuroa, or Aotearoa, but also gives us a deep connection to our natural world and the taiao, where we turn to and where everything pretty much in our culture is derived from. Although we can't put our finger on who or what was kuwi and tumutumu whenua, within the epistemology and the philosophies of our people, what we do know is that we have a very deep connection to nukuroa Aotearoa. We have a very deep connection to our taiao through those whakapapa. And so when we go back to our tangata whenua whakapapa, we will always go back to tumutumu whenua and kuwi to give us that right to stand on this land. Now, most iwi have their own tangata whenua story or whakapapa. Tūhoi have hinepu kohurangi, as do other people have their own kōrero. We have tumutumu whenua and kuwi, and that gives us certain rights and privileges, but it also tells us that our connection to the taiao is unbroken, and that we are the taiao, and the taiao is us. We are born out of the natural world, and it's seen in everything we do. It's in our art forms and patterning. It's in our design of our buildings. It's in the narrative and the kōrero, in our whakatauki, in our pepeha. It's in everything that we do, everything that we say is shaped by the taiao, and we can thank tumutumu whenua and kuwi for that.